Oh, and we got Rich.
I made
All
it.
right. Hello and welcome to episode 45 of the CIS and Senteon webinar series. And we officially have CIS with us. Rich is back from his trip. So very happy to have you. Dave, thank you for being a guest today. We will be diving into introductions here in a moment, but per our new routine, we got Matt Lee in the audience. Highlight that. And yes, thank you for joining. Thank you for the educational shout outs. So just to kick off like normal, we're going to go over a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to dive right into the introductions and the settings. So with that, let's go ahead and pop my screen onto the window. And really quick, the next presentation I'll be doing is hosted on InfoSec Live. We will be reviewing the CIS benchmarks and how that matters to the larger picture as a whole, while this series rather, is more focused on the granular setting. So that is coming up next week on Tuesday with Simon from InfoSec Live. At the end of the month, Senteon and obviously myself will be holding a hardening workshop at ChannelCon for CompTIA. If you are out there, please reach out. Hopefully you want to come learn about some more hardening stuff, but we will be giving a 45-minute workshop, so really excited to be doing that. And then just as the general reminder on how you can continue to stay up to date with Senteon and these webinars here, you can head to our website, senteon.co, and you can see all of the previous episodes here. Kicking off with Matt Lee, who already gave a shout out in the audience, but we got 1, 2, 3, and we're doing part 4 today. So really excited to dive into that. I do my best to do blogs afterwards, as you can read about the settings and learn at your own pace. Outside of that, as a thank you for joining the webinar series, you are welcome to sign up for Senteon and get a free evaluation. We actually have a freemium model here. So we take all of these CIS recommendations, we put them into a easy to use table format for you, and we show all of the crosswalks, what the settings are, and best of all, if you ever don't know what a setting is, you can click right into it, see the pathway, and straight from the CIS benchmarks, we provide the description, rationale, and impact. So shout out to CIS for providing
So
all
nice.
that documentation.
I love that, Zach.
Yeah, and something I am starting to do as a thank you to everyone in the audience for watching, you are able to kick off the free evaluation and use report generation, internal or external. Senteon's given this away for free as a thank you for joining the series. This allows you to see where all of your settings sit currently with CIS, and you can tailor it to the regulatory crosswalks. Excel export this right here, and now your partners have a better idea of where they are today and potentially a new billable project for you. So
Zach,
with
let me
that,
take a guess. If you go back one slide, is that an F for some out of the box configuration?
this is an F. So by default, any Windows workstation, Windows server will come back an F. Why? Maybe we could ask Microsoft that question. But very awesome. And that is housekeeping. Let's get to the stuff we actually want to talk about today and meet Dave. Dave, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I got to meet Dave probably about a few months ago. One of the first people I got to meet via the Tech Tribe, a great community for MSPs to get to know each other, learn about the new trends, everything going on. But Dave, you're extremely technical. You picked up all of these configurations right out of the gate. You've been great to work with, but please, if you don't mind, give an introduction of yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am showing up from Minnesota. I work with Emerson Technologies. We're a managed service provider in the Twin Cities area. Been around for longer than I'd like to remember. My origin in technology was on the software development programming side. I was around and started getting into security when the Code Red and NIMDA scares came out long ago. I was programmer on the network and suddenly discovered, hey, wait, this isn't right. There's something on our network here. So talked to the sysadmins, and well, we've got that figured out, and then just kind of slowly been moving more and more to the sysadmin side until joining Emerson Technologies and kind of doing the MSP thing full time.
So you started very much, working on the screens, banging keyboards, and you're not giving yourself enough credit. You are the business owner over at Emerson Technologies. No?
I'm not the owner. I'm in when the senior leadership along with Phil Emerson. He's the owner,
Okay.
but we work solidly together and have for quite a few years. So
Nice.
It's
to
awesome to hear.
come and join you guys, and it's been fun, kind of digging into Senteon and seeing what it can do, and putting it to use and trying to help our customers get more secure.
Dave, I know you want to make this section quick so we can get into the heart of the matter, but what's your experience with CIS?
So we've got a number of clients in different verticals that are just that they're constantly reaching out of where that they want to make sure that they're securing their data and their customers' data as much as possible. And we're finding that there's a lot of people that have tried to come up with a homebrew security posture, security solution, and it's really not, most of what they're finding is not relevant. It's copy and paste from some Google articles that are usually 10, 15 years old, and it doesn't really apply anymore. So we're regularly kind of introducing them to CIS and saying, hey, here's a great, pretty straightforward way to start dipping your toe into getting more and more secure. And as you mature as an organization, you can delve into it that much more.
Yeah, I love that, Dave. And I feel like CIS really provides that roadmap through the CIS controls to make sure you have all of your bases covered. And it gives you kind of that prioritized list to be able to spend money where it's really critical and not spend money on lower priority items, which, for a lot of organizations, that's very important. And Matt, we see your comments. Mr. CIS in the peanut gallery. Thanks for joining, Matt. Love you, buddy.
Matt is being so subtle. He was a great season opener to the webinar series, and we're doing a lot of cool things in the background, creating a Rich. Actually, I need to catch you up on. We'll be doing a CIS working group that is turning into a little bit of a Discord server community. So
Awesome.
we'll talk about that
Yay.
more as it goes live. But Dave, Rich, like we said, let's get into the meat of the episode and toss on the first slide here. So, Dave, you did talk about how you're using CIS today and how that's going. So this concept of hardening, you've been in the space, you've watched the transition. Is hardening something new, something that was forgotten? Where is hardening sitting on your priority list 10 years ago versus today?
Sure. Well, I think hardening has always been there as a goal, as an ideal. It's getting more formalized, and we're understanding more and more how important it is. For the longest time, up until recently, for us, we've been hardening using, let's do group policy, let's do some PowerShell scripts, let's kind of use the living off the land infrastructure to make it happen. We're finally getting to the point where, oh, that actually doesn't really do what we think it was doing. So maybe we need some additional checks and balances. So it's growing and maturing, but it's not exactly something new.
I like the way you put that. I think that's one of the things that we really had to figure out. Like, how do we bring more awareness? Like, this is Microsoft's domain. Microsoft should control these settings. Intune is there for this purpose. But as someone who's experienced and seen, I guess, the efficacy and the reliableness or not reliableness of these Microsoft GPOs and domain level, it's confusing, right? So appreciate that introduction on that.
Yeah,
And
just, I want to add, though, that small things matter increasingly so. As attacks become more sophisticated, things like simple settings that maybe you didn't think about before, you should think about now, particularly with browsers, because the browser is becoming a hub for access to all kinds of SaaS applications and so forth. And there's a lot of potential for bad things to happen that you maybe are not aware of, or just be aware that settings do matter in, increasingly every single day as attacks become more sophisticated.
And we're about to learn how some of these settings can mitigate risk. So let's dive into the first one here, Dave. So we have blocks external extensions from being installed set to enabled. So anything external, I immediately think this needs to be blocked. But we're going to have those customers who need extensions. What does external mean? Why is this setting a recommendation here?
Well, why should you allow some third-party software installed in your browser? You don't install let your end users install random fancy game of the week. Why should you let them do it in the browser? The browser is just another avenue for it's software.
Destruction.
I kind of think of the setting like, what brand do you like to use? Whether, trying to relate this back to real life, like if you have a favorite video game brand, right? Hey, I'm always going to buy games from this brand. Why would I want to use a different one, right? There's trusted brands in this extension world, and some of these are there that probably shouldn't be. Is there any good way to? Is there ever a reason not to follow this recommendation? Are there some extensions you've come across that just require access to this, or not so much?
Well, I mean, there's always going to be instances where you need extensions. And so like 1Password, that's for our organization internally, absolutely 100% need your browser to be integrated with your password management solution. So you need to do your due diligence, go through your internal processes to make sure that you vet your extensions. But maybe that let's review this website of the day pop-up blocker Donkey Kong game of the week is not going to be the best option, or you should at least go through your internal controls to make sure that, oh yeah, this is a vetted
I think
trust.
that's the key, Dave. It needs to be a professional, an IT professional in the organization, or maybe an MSP making that decision, not an end user. And if exceptions do exist, so if you have something that you feel is critical for your particular use case within your browser, bring it forward and make sure it's safe.
Yeah. Want to prevent shadow IT.
Right
I
on.
don't know if that will ever be 100% possible, but it should be everyone's goal. Dave, I know you personally, so I very much know you're a very mature MSP organization. So you are talking about processes and reviews. The general MSP that maybe is just starting down the security path. Could you introduce more what that looks like? How often are you doing reviews? How did you create your first documented process? Kind of talk towards a newer MSP who's looking to start a hardening project.
Sure. Well, I think it also depends on the end customer that you're working with, because you're going to have some customers that are required to be in a more regulated industry, so and then there's also some customers that are going to be moving fast, and there may be some instances where you need a regular monthly review process to say, okay, here's the requests we got. Yes, this is legitimate. This needs more details. There's others that realistically you're going to get. You need to sit down, do your due diligence once, and then you might not get additional requests more than once or twice a year. So it's really application specific, customer specific, and I don't know that there's a one size fits all solution for it. You need to kind of step through what your customers are saying for you and hit that best of breed pain points to the end user versus security and functionality.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people, I mean, especially people who've dealt with templates have very much strong opinions probably on templates, because this is not a one size fits all thing.
No,
that is one thing. It may, and even within one business, you may have multiple different golden images per department, per that one application that one person has, right? So it's not bad to have different baselines throughout your org, but it's important to document and make sure they still need a different one, right? So absolutely
I feel
perfect
like
explanation
education, Zach, is a big part of this. And Dave, users need to understand why the Donkey Kong game of the day is not a good idea. In people, oftentimes they'll get frustrated because they don't understand the risks that are coming with the new version of Donkey Kong as an extension. So, once no one wants to be the weak link in the organization, no one wants to, cause something bad to happen. So I feel like, if people just understand, that there are risks and, what those are and what they can be, that people will generally understand and, not take a hard line that they, need to have this ridiculous extension. I mean, in exceptions always do exist. If there's a valid business case, bring it forward. It'll be reviewed, and if it's valid, it'll happen. Is my opinion how things generally work with MSPs and with organizations.
Yep. Awesome. All right, let's get to this next setting. And we do have a bit of an extension theme for these first few, which is important to call out. Obviously, that is one of the topics of the webinar in the title. So if you're here, hopefully you're looking forward to this. But these settings all entangle with each other, right? Just doing one of these is good, but it's important to do all of the hardening settings within that category. So that's the only way you're going to fully secure your
They work
extensions.
in concert, right? They work in
Yep.
concert. They really do.
All right, so this setting here, configure allowed app extension types, is set to enabled, extension, hosted app, platform app, theme app. This sounds like you're creating an approval list. Is that what this setting is saying?
Yep, that's it exactly. Why should you allow something that you don't want? Like user scripts is an example of something not in that magical list. Why the heck would you want to allow user scripts? That just sounds like a very, very, very bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're just kind of locking it down to a allow list.
And this really feeds into, I mean, I think we have the control. Oh, I was going to move the controls so you could see it. I'll do that next week. But this sounds like it kind of feeds into controls probably too with software inventory of assets. I know Matt Lee can drop in the comments if I'm completely off base here, but this sounds like somewhere where you need to know your assets, know your software inventory, and then this setting is going to enforce and enhance the meeting of that requirement. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yep. And
Cool.
going into the CIS Control 9.4, the restricting unnecessary or unauthorized browser and email extensions explicitly.
Yep.
Love that, Dave. Just
So,
pulling out the quote. Solid.
well,
It's
I can
absolutely
read the
perfect.
slides too.
Oh, that's perfect. Again, just best practices. Do you have any advice on how to hold keep your asset inventory up to date? Obviously, everyone wants to install a new piece of software. They don't always ask approval. Do you have any best practices you can share on how to stay up to date with asset inventory?
I think it's really putting the the locking down the environment as much as possible and using your RMM tool set, your security tool set, um, app restrictions as best as possible. Every situation's got a little bit of differences with if you're working with a software development firm, they're going to have very different restrictions and needs for their developers than they would maybe the marketing department. So
Yep.
really, it's doing due diligence and make sure you've got your scanning process, your notification process, and setting up a culture of, hey, we don't want to be the bad guy, but
Yes.
go through us first so that we can help you do it right and make sure that it's secure, so we don't have to come back and smack down
So
something
important.
that
Yeah,
we need
so
to.
important, Dave. That can't be
Fantastic.
said enough, I feel like.
Appreciate the shout out, Chad. But that's an absolute perfect explanation there as well. So wanting to expand a little bit more, something Felicia King would bring up in one of the webinars we did, and something she's really passionate about is making sure, whether it's the manager level or the director level, making sure someone at that business has ownership of that asset or that platform.
Mhm.
Is that something you also practice or try to practice? Could you talk towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got, if there's a need for a specific piece of software, somebody has to own it. Somebody has to manage it. It can't just be random end user. Hey, I want to use this marketing tool of the day. What is the business need for it? Who's going to manage access to it? Who's going to manage what company assets and company resources are available through it? And then making sure that the correct technology team is involved with that to make sure, hey, we can turn on single sign-on, we can make sure that MFA is enabled, all the other pieces that we need to keep track of.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
is a life cycle. You've just described a life cycle. When the marketing person asks for that great product, they don't understand necessarily that all of those things need to be considered before action can be taken. And I know it's frustrating for end users, but Dave describes the process perfectly.
It's funny, we talk about all these high-level processes and how important they are, but they all relate back to these granular settings. So with that, let's go into this next setting here. So we have configure extension installation block list set to enabled. If we have an allow list, why do we need a block list? I'm confused here. Do we need both of these settings?
Yeah, the settings that we have available to us are not exactly always the most straightforward, but you absolutely only want to allow approved extensions. Kind of comes back to what we talked about for the first slide. What yeah.
I think in this too, you're able to, add known bad things. There's obviously there's public information on known bad kinds of things, and you can automatically just add those in. But with the other setting, you probably don't really need to. I understand that, but maybe it gives people more confidence having some of that in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the flexibility, right? I mean, do both, I think, is what obviously CIS recommends here, but
I think the
at
risk
least
is that, something that is falls within the category of the last slide slips in through that, kind of heading possibly. And this would be a way of excluding known bad things at least.
Yeah.
I mean, like we said, these settings all feed into each other. So I might have asked that in a sarcastic way, but at the same time, these do matter to do both. So let's do this next one here. So default third-party storage partitioning setting is set to enabled and blocked. I know all about third-party cookies and everything like that, but Dave, could you explain the setting a little bit better for us?
Sure. Well, yeah. So we're exactly that, going into denying third-party cookies, denying the ability for third parties to track your users across sites.
Any kind of
Legitimate
persistence, no
business
persistence.
use for that.
Yep.
We're not talking first-party cookies. We're not talking the website they're logging into. This is third-party, and there's no legitimate business need to have that turned on. So turn it off and don't allow that cross-site tracking. Don't allow your data leakage.
Yep. And I think another important thing here is it does talk about partitioning. So, one, making sure it's blocked, but two, making sure it doesn't bleed into other sensitive data, right? This is automatically going to, I guess, categorize is one way to say this, but this is making sure certain things are not bleeding into each other.
It's a way of protecting an organization's IP as well, because if you're not, if anything that gets sent out of the organization that you don't have control over, which this sounds like that is to me, you have a risk of losing data. And you have a risk of that data going to a place that's maybe not as secured as your own policies dictate. And that matters.
Yeah. I think
you also advertise the tool set that you're using internally too, which no reason to do that.
Nope.
And I will note, I think there probably are some sites out there that do require third-party cookies. So if you notice in the bottom right, we have level 2 there. So as a quick explanation of what this means, CIS does make their recommendations for browsers on level 1 or level 2. Level 2 is really made for the more security-minded businesses that can handle a little bit of disruption, right? So this is CIS basically warning you, yes, this is best practice to do so, but if you do this, there may be some sites that can't be accessed, right? There may be some end client frustration there. So I want to make sure we call out that this is a level 2 setting. Cool. All right, let's keep on grinding through. So the next one here is control. Oops, I did not update the title here, did I? Or is this just the same setting? So block third-party storage partitioning to these origins is set to configured. So this again is sounding like another known bad list. Is that what this is really getting at?
Yep. And kind of if you don't want to block all the third-party sites from accessing the browser, here's your exception list. Here's your if there's like you're mentioning, there might be some that you can't completely block. So
maybe you're working with a partner, maybe you're working with a dev partner and you're sharing files in a secure space. That would be an exception that may be acceptable.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good example too, because we do talk about, creating exceptions, documenting exceptions. It sounds like this is a complementary setting to what we just talked about, to where once you set the exception, it doesn't take, changing the configuration or changing certain things. You're just adding or removing things from a list to this specific setting. So sounds like this is a setting to make it a little bit easier to manage.
Also adds potential for configuration drift by adding things and not removing them in a timely basis. So you have to be careful for that.
There you go. All right, let's go over to the next setting here. We got control manifest v2 extension availability is set to forced only. Again, I want to shout out here that this is a level 2 setting. So we do have some more secure setting recommendations in here. So be careful if you do take these recommendations. Make sure you do your testing. But Dave, any input you can share on this setting here?
Yes, this one, I'm guessing we're going to see an update to this in the near future, seeing that this is kind of referring to legacy the original manifest extensions, and kind of ensuring that your extensions are most up to date and they're secure. Now that manifest v2 is deprecated and going away and gone away for the most part, it's time for manifest v3. So it just kind of kind of going back to some of the core controls and make sure that all your software is up to date.
Right on.
I would say that this will probably change to a level 1 setting as we do get that v3 version. But that's a good call out too, Dave. Obviously, full transparency. Thank you. You're a Senteon user. But I mean, before you had a vendor who was really keeping you up to date on these configurations and letting you know, hey, new recommendation out. We now need to do this. How did you manage this before having a vendor be kind of that SME? Was that possible? Is it what did that look like?
It's trying as best you can with PowerShell scripting and the RMM automating ticket generation, and really hoping that the education process works. It's you can set the group policy as much as possible, but users are really good at squirreling away.
You use the key word there, Dave. Hoping.
Yeah.
Hoping's never a good policy. Hoping's not a policy.
Exactly.
What if I write it down, Rich? Is it not a policy then?
Maybe for you, Zach, but for the rest of the world, no.
We'd have to ask Maria from last week. If I document, I'm hoping this setting changes. Would a GRC or an audit accept that as a complementary control?
As a rule of thumb, they don't recognize hope as part of GRC.
Bad, Zach. Bad.
All right. But no, that makes sense. You're right. The application of this is hard. But I mean, even when these recommendations change, do you have any like best practice, news outlets or, subscribing to CIS? I know they share those when they come out. They're hard to keep up with sometimes because they do a lot more than just Windows. But do you have any previous best practices, or it was really just as it popped up in the news and more reactively?
It's primarily reactive is the kind of the biggest source I found, trying to stay in the center of the security and cybersecurity community and seeing what's happening, what are I know the Reddit communities are great for kind of providing an insight for, oh, hey, this popular extension just got bought by marketer of the day, so now it's on the bad list. So I don't think there's any one source. It's just like all the other resources, trying to stay up to date on what's happening in the industry and
yeah, I think everyone's got their favorite crowdsource source of information, and it's very valuable, but it is hard to keep up with for sure.
Yep, spot on. Let's go over to this next setting here. So we got control availability of extensions unpublished on the Chrome Web Store is set to disabled. So I mean, we all know probably what the Microsoft Store is, but this Chrome Web Store effectively is a very similar thing to the App Store, to the Microsoft Store. These are just applications. But in this setting, it sounds like there's a difference between published and unpublished accessibility in the store. So could you explain why this difference matters?
Yeah, well, I kind of liken it to sideloading your apps on your mobile phone. They're not vetted. They're not. They might be in developer mode.
Yep.
It might be some it's a way to get around your standard security controls. If they're not fully published, they fully go through the approval process. There's no guarantee that it's just because it's approved and published that it's good. We've all seen
Yep.
instances of that not
Yep.
working and being bad, but it's just locking things down again to controlling what software is installed in your browser and in your environment.
Protecting users against themselves, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's a big thing, and something I think Heather might have said this the other week, but these hardening settings, and Rich, you just kind of pointed it out, it's controlling the end user a little bit more for their own protection. So having these settings in place, would you think, do you believe this has an impact on security culture at the end business? Does this make that better, make it more easier to talk about? Does this have any impact on the culture of the security mindset?
I think it does personally. Again, it comes down to that education again and why these things are not acceptable. Then maybe that's acceptable on your home machine in the basement, but it's not appropriate at work because bad things can happen.
Yeah, awesome. All right, let's check out the next setting here. So we got supported authentication schemes is set to enabled NTLM negotiate. Again, we have a very high level presentation here. So level 2 setting again. So be careful here because NTLM is going to require the right authentication, most up-to-date protocols. But Dave, is there any further explanation you can share on this setting here?
Well, your the authentication schemes that we're missing here are typically basic and digest.
Yep.
So those have no encryption, no security associated with them, or it's very easy to bypass. So we definitely don't want to allow users to, unless it's a legacy internal annoying application that you're always going to run into. You don't want to allow users to be passing any credentials over there because they're just simply clear text.
Yep. Yeah, and we talk about often if we have that legacy system on the network and it does need to run and uses maybe clear text and stuff like that, you just need to really, put that behind some extra layers and, you can still protect it, but, until you can move to something more secure. But, every organization's got that system somewhere and you just really got to build those controls around it until you can improve the situation.
I think this is a good talking point as well, Dave. Do you have any examples you can maybe share a story of where a client had to have a legacy application or an outdated version of Windows to keep an application working? How did you handle that risk? And did you take any extra steps to segment that or any security steps?
Sure. Yeah, we always run into those types of things. Like they're typically software that was developed internally, like maybe some control system or something like that's sitting on a legacy server. Jimmy developed the software 10, 15 years ago. It keeps working. We don't have the funds to extend it or redevelop it. So like when we run into those, we're going to put it behind a web application firewall or a VPN so that it's only accessible from known trusted IPs through that tunnel or through the on-site
Nice.
network.
Yep. I can give you another example,
Yeah.
Zach. It's someone that spends a lot of time in the medical infrastructure. Medical imaging systems all run on old operating systems that keep working, no problem, but they don't get updated. There's a lot of embedded systems in medical equipment and all across every industry that has that stuff. So it is important.
Absolutely. But going back to a previous topic we said with documentation and reviewing, Dave, for these systems and Rich as well, like for these systems, do they have a higher review cadence or are they just kind of set it? We can't touch it anyway, so no need to review it.
I think it depends on the situation. If it is a static system, if it's something that isn't changing, I mean, you need to still review, is this important? Is it still needed? But if it's not changing, there's not a whole lot to review. There's not anything you can do about it other than pinging the vendor, hey, did you actually fix your software so you're not running Windows 7 anymore?
And just
Or
confirming on a regular cadence that those secure connections that you've built in are are working properly, and there's not additional, connections that have tapped in without your knowledge.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. Thanks for the explanation there. Again, want to just make this as best practice and high value education content as possible. So let's get into this next setting here. So we have configure native messaging block list is set to enabled. So again, we have allow list, we have block lists. What's this talking about in this respect with native messaging?
Yeah, so this is going into your plugins and extensions, kind of talking to your built-in native applications. And going back to one of the previous examples, 1Password is my password manager of choice. That's what we use at Emerson Technologies. When you click that little browser button, it's talking to your installed desktop application. You want it to do that because then you get all the wonderful functionality of that built-in desktop application. So you need to use this to allow that and secure it without allowing all desktop applications or nefarious desktop applications to be
Approved only.
useful.
Yep. And I think the key thing to expand on that too is, you need to configure that to make sure it is allowed. If you don't configure this, everything will be allowed. That's why this is a level 2 setting, because if you turn this on, but you don't actually, allow anything, that's going to break a lot. So making sure if you turn this on to take the additional steps of outlining what's allowed is critical here.
Yep. It kind of goes back to what do you have enabled in your browser, and why do you have it enabled, and is it needed?
What software is running in your organization? Back to the controls.
Yep. I did not realize how many level 2 settings were in this episode. So Dave, you are killing it. All right, let's go to this next setting here. And I think this is the last setting of the day. I'm doing much better at managing my time after running over for the first 3 weeks. So kudos to myself there. I'll pat myself on the back here. But this setting here is a level 1 setting. So enable saving passwords to the password manager is set to explicitly configured. So this is not saying you can't store passwords to the browsers. This isn't saying you're not allowed to, but this is saying you need to make a decision and you need to either allow it or not allow it. So Dave, what's your point of view on this setting? What do you recommend saving to the browser? How would you handle this setting?
So my recommendation to my clients is to always use a password management tool. Don't use, I don't like recommending the built-in browser password managers. They don't have the controls. They don't have the monitoring. They don't have the security that I want to see. But I would much rather have somebody use the password manager in the browser than use an Excel spreadsheet or a sticky note. So if I've got somebody that for some reason is just absolutely refusing to go there, then we'll talk about the using the browser password manager. But I really want to have a enterprise level password manager in play.
We've got Matt on the audience, and this is Matt's favorite exploit, right? You step away, Dave, you get up and turn your back. Matt's sitting at your machine, navigating whatever he can. And if you have saved passwords in your browser, guess what? He's going there fast. So you just don't want that, in my opinion.
I think that's a good point. And I think this is one setting that even the end client is going to understand without you really educating them on it, right? They may push back and be like, it's Google. I trust Google to hold my password. They hold everything else, right? I mean, I have Google Drive. Senteon has enterprise Google, right? But we still have Google Drive. Everything's there. It's easy to use. Why can't they also have my password? So I can see that conversation being a bit of a battle, but it sounds like you've had this conversation and typically they do understand the value of a password manager. Is that?
Yeah. Once you kind of have a few of those discussions of why am I getting this email from you guys about showing up on Have I Been Pwned? Well, you're using the same password. So now let's talk about the wonderful functionality of a random password generator and not using Hello Kitty 123 as your password of choice on every single website. And
that's spot on. And I always reference this setting as well, right? We obviously have a 10-part series where we're talking about 10 to 12 settings every single week. But this is the setting that it seems like everyone knows about and no one wants to allow, right? So whenever I give a Senteon presentation talking about this, I'm like, hey, do you know about this setting? They always go, yes. Did you know there's another 100 settings you can do to secure your browser? And this is where I'm really glad to have guests like you to really bring education and bring focus to the greater 100 settings instead of just doing the one that you know about. So awesome. That is the settings section for today. So now we actually have time to cover the rest of the slides that usually I have to skip through. So with that, let's go over to the MITRE ATT&CK slide. So this here, again, I'll try to make the font a little bit bigger. This is a new webinar format, so I am just getting best practices figured out for this. But these settings that we talked about today, last week, next week, these are all settings that are mitigating your risk. And CIS does a great job at mapping their settings to various MITRE ATT&CK techniques. For those of us in the audience that are not familiar with MITRE, a MITRE ATT&CK specifically, these are rather attacker styles or attacker methods, right? That's probably the easier word than
Common
techniques.
methods.
Yeah,
Common
I like methods. But these are things that they will want to do and want to perform successfully, but will have a harder time with the settings we talk about in place. So
Yeah, I appreciate you giving CIS all the credit for that, but it's not really the case. We work very
oh,
closely with MITRE, and they help us just as much as we help them. So what CIS's position in our longtime relationship with MITRE is to use their knowledge and their framework, which is amazing, to kind of affect the priorities of our controls and what our controls are, and it shifts. We don't change, unfortunately, as fast as the techniques change, but we catch up quickly. And the relationship between CIS and MITRE is long and it's strong and will continue. And as these attack techniques evolve, we evolve at CIS and respond to those. And it really gives it's a great relationship, and it is so critical to what we do.
yeah, awesome. That's more insight than I knew. So appreciate that insight there. Glad to hear CI is working with
No, we
MITRE
work
themselves.
directly with MITRE, yes, and
Yeah,
have
I
for a
think that's
long
how the community defense model, CIS CDM was probably put together. If you're not familiar with that, I'll drop it in the
time.
chats after the
Amazing.
show. But the CDM is really good at calling out, what are the key controls or key things you need to do right away, and how much risk is actually mitigated in a, I guess, quantifiable or percentage point type
Yeah,
of way.
it's all about, everyone has limited budgets. I don't care if you're, a huge company or a small company. Everyone still has somewhat of a limited budget. So by really focusing on what the key techniques are that the bad guys are using, and applying the CIS guidance on how to mitigate those attack formats, you're putting yourself in the best position, and you're spending money where it's appropriate in maybe reserving those dollars for lower priority items for the future.
It's not just money, but spending time, because we
Time,
all have
sure.
very limited time. And if you go back to the good old 80-20 rule, what can you get the best bang for your
That's
buck
it.
out of?
That's it. And if you ignore these attack techniques, they will bite you. I mean, there's no questioning that. I mean, it's not, these attack techniques are not, designed to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They are real, and they happen every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, speaking of all these attacks, let's actually call out a couple here. Obviously, credential access, we know which setting that relates to. That's very obvious. The first one here with malicious software deployment, we talked a lot about extensions. If you
Right
do
there.
have an unauthorized or a, out of date extension, is that what that's referring to? Can bad actors take advantage of that and actually deploy malicious software?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
There's plenty of examples of that with, I remember back to some of the pop-up blocker and the kind of the uBlock
Yep.
extensions that get either taken over, the developer sells the extension to somebody else. You never know what's being deployed in there if you're not
Hey,
going through your due diligence.
if I wanted to put a keyboard logger on your system, Zach, I would try to do it through an extension, a browser extension, because all your
Tell me.
information is going through a browser out to other systems. And if I can collect that information, I want it. And
I already give that to Grammarly anyway. No, no,
you don't
no,
have to.
those are good examples. Another one, which is I think this is more of an attack tactic. I think it's part of the attack chain, is persistence. Dave, at a high level, what does persistence mean from the attacker point of view?
Persistence is keeping the access you worked so hard to get. It's finding multiple ways to be able to remotely control these systems that you got access to, and making sure that you can use them when you want.
Yeah, persistence in my mind is actually part of a new technique method that is a business. So there's groups of hackers that focus on gaining access, getting that persistence, and then selling that to the next guy. It's a complete business on its own, just getting persistence and maintaining it.
With great customer service, from what I've heard, which is
Mhm.
absolutely
Scary.
wild. But
Disturbing is what it is.
yes,
Hmm.
we talked about execution with deployment, data manipulation. I mean, this is intuitively important, right? You don't want a bad actor to gain access, change your documents, and now you're relaying misinformation or not accurate data.
We're putting
Um,
company information out to a malicious storage element that we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Yep.
The one other one on here is talking about exfiltration, right? Could you explain why do bad actors want to take data off of the device they're in? I mean, why is that so critical, or why is that valuable?
That's getting the keys to the kingdom. You get on the CEO's computer through their browser. Suddenly, you have access to their email or something like that. Let's exfil the data over DNS,
That's
or
where the value is.
yeah, let's get it out using some non-standard method. The bad actors aren't really going to are not going to often spin up a Dropbox account and export it that way. Let's you get the data out so that you can then ransom it for public disclosure, or you got your healthcare
Blackmail, anything.
data, all of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's amazing. And I'm going to say that kind of wraps up the technical part of the show. So now I'm going to ask you to put your other hat on, and we'll swing over to this last slide here. So business perspective, again, this is educational, high level for the newer MSP or maybe a mature MSP who hasn't done hardening yet, right? What's your point of view on, should MSPs take responsibility for these configurations? Is this the end client's responsibility? Talk about, I guess, the benefits and things that should be going into the thought process for an MSP looking at doing this.
Well, I think from an MSP perspective, I like to think of ourselves as the internal IT department. We just have a different company name, and so we're really trying to work for the end user. We're trying to make their life better in the long term, and more secure in the long term, and make life better for the company and the organization as a whole. And if if the MSP doesn't focus on this, who's going to focus on it? Because you are the technology experts, you're the security experts, you're bringing your expertise to the organization, so you need to lead that drive. There needs to be buy-in and strong support from the management,
Mm-hmm.
but it needs to be a core part of the offering from the MSP.
Ultimately, if you are the partner that the MSP running that infrastructure, something bad happens, whose fault is it? It's not theirs, it's yours.
Hmm.
And it's going to cost you money. It's going to potentially cost you reputation as well as the target company's reputation. So, I mean, these are very serious discussions that do have to happen with give and take. There's not one right answer. But everyone just needs to understand the risks and make the best plan for that organization. And I think you said that very, very well, Dave. It is a collaborative effort.
The keyword I want to call out is gain the organization's buy-in, Dave. You obviously you service multiple security solutions. You do manual work. You do automation, vendors. You have all of these pieces to the puzzle, and you have to talk about buy-in. So when you have something new or taking on a new initiative, what's that buy-in process look like? And do you ever involve the vendor themselves to assist with gaining buy-in, or is that something you do on your own?
I think it definitely depends on the vendor and what the solution is, but we definitely involve as many resources as possible, because the as an MSP, I'm not going to be I can't be as knowledgeable about every single piece of software, every single tool set as the vendor is. So I want to leverage the extensive knowledge from the vendor whenever possible. That said,
And I
the
would
vendor has to be public facing and appropriate to the client.
Yeah, I would assume that also, say if there's a particular gap you're trying to fill with a point solution from a vendor, you're probably introducing one, two, or three vendors as options to your client, and ultimately they make the decision based on your support and as well. But there's multiple solutions that would be viable for any particular category at this point in time.
Absolutely.
Awesome to hear. A couple other points here. It does say operational risks in the bottom. When we talk about user impact, some of these settings can cause that type of disruption. Do you have any advice on kind of a rollout methodology of changing these settings? And I mean, even if you have a story on, a time you caused disruption and how you handled it.
Well, I think the biggest recommendation is dog food your own solution. Eat and live that tool set yourself. Try it out first yourself, so and your team knows what it looks like from the end user perspective. Until you do that, you have no business pushing it out to your
It's
your
all about hope,
customers.
not right. It's all about hope.
Yeah, you
We talked about
exactly.
that earlier.
Yeah, you got to try it yourself, and then go through your hopefully what is your standard process of, let's do a pilot
Yep.
project
Yep.
to walk through with the end user. This is what it's going to look like. Get some champions on site internally who can kind of help spread good words and good thoughts about this is why it's important, and kind of be an easy point of contact for end users. There's always going to be some things that break. Maybe
Yep.
you discovered somebody is using that password manager in the browser, and hopefully you didn't clear the password cache when you enabled
That's a
it.
good example.
Resets are easy these days, so I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah.
The conversation about resets isn't easy though, Rich.
Yeah.
Easy for me to say. I get it.
Passwords resets are easy as long as that person is not the admin for that one special account that requires talking to support. And
hopefully they didn't have their Bitcoin wallet on there.
There you go.
So that's perfect. And I'm realizing I forgot to ask my icebreaker question at the start of the show. I knew something felt off because I skipped it. But Dave, what is the most interesting place you've ever taken a customer phone call?
Most interesting. Let's see. That should have.
That's a stumper right there. Ski lifts, maybe.
I know Matt Lee was sharing on a bike ride. Maria was in a library.
I'd have to go with ski lift personally, but it's been a long time since that happened.
Probably at a park out with the family, just kind of enjoying the late afternoon, evening. Probably out at just a city park. Get a phone call. Hey, this random piece of technology isn't working for some reason. They don't call the help desk. They decided to
why call it help desk
me.
when you can call Dave?
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's hard training end users, but I think if I remember the situation right, there was some password reset or something like that, and of course I don't have a laptop with me. I wanted sure, I can open up a ticket for you and get somebody on it. Why not?
Yeah.
You send the message right after, and that ticket's still made by someone else at least. No, that's perfect, brother.
I think that raises a good point, Zach. Burnout's a big issue in our industry, and you do need to disconnect. Use me as the example. I just spent a month on a boat, coming back refreshed, and
Nice.
we had sat comms on the boat, and I never checked anything, and it was difficult for me. So sorry about that if you're trying to find me.
No, I think that's perfect. And Dave, we have about a few minutes left, and then I'll do just wrap up. I mean, is there any key closing thoughts that you really want to leave the audience with? Anything you want to just share?
I think that the biggest is getting a toehold into starting this process and starting to get secure is much better than just thinking about it. You've got to start somewhere. And the all of the CIS benchmarks and the controls, they're a journey. They're not something you're going to get implemented in a week, in a month, in 6 months. It takes a lot of thought, a lot of work, and a lot of effort, but getting started with it is only going to improve your security posture. It's only going to improve the security posture for your customers. And you gotta start again with that 80-20 rule.
And
There's a lot of things that will hit
I
the
would
biggest bang for the buck. It's
I
easy.
would disagree just slightly, Dave. I do agree with the concept of what you're describing, but Senteon really takes that journey and shortens it very, very
For
nicely.
It is still a journey.
endpoint security, yes. But
It's always a journey.
so far, I haven't gotten Senteon to write up all my policy documents.
Zach, what are you doing?
You're
Get on
telling
that.
me you want AI to get integrated with all your GP? I don't think that's a good idea.
You know,
Next year.
Senteon definitely helps speed up the process immensely.
No, I appreciate the shout out there, Rich. But no, Dave, those are great closing thoughts, right? This Senteon is the anti-template approach. This 80-20 rule, we don't want to change 1,000 GPOs right away, let alone that's just talking about control 4, right? This is 18 controls, 18 key steps, prioritized list, however you want to call it. But don't do all of it at once, right? You're not going to get a pen test before you know your asset inventory. That doesn't make sense. So, but very much, Dave, thank you for coming on. You've been an incredible guest. Rich, I'm going to give you the same chance because I actually wrapped up like on time. Any just closing thoughts from you before I do my wrap up?
Oh, I'm just super happy to be back. It's great to meet Dave. This is my first thing with Dave, so hopefully we can do more. Yeah, just glad to be back. I did have a long vacation, but I'm back and ready to go. And if anyone wants to hit me up for anything, you know where to find me, right on the screen there with somewhere on the screen. Maybe the next slide.
We'll toss your LinkedIn in there. I changed the slides, so let's full screen this. I'll do my wrap up. So we are here weekly. We do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I say that as I'm realizing I am actually flying next week, heading back to Indiana. So I will be holding the webinar next week with Brian Reese, a professor out of Penn State, who is also an MSP owner. And that will be on Thursday next week. So you will not see us Wednesday. Just keep that in mind. These episodes are all, like I shared at the beginning, on our website, senteon.co. Head to the YouTube channel and you can see all the recordings. I am working to make more bite-sized content, and you can see that based on my profile or the YouTube shorts. So that will all be coming. And again, as a thank you for everyone who watches the webinar, Senteon does provide free assessments to anyone who lets me know they watch this. Internal, external, get a feel of where you currently sit with your security posture, and then make a decision if you want to attack this manually or leverage Senteon, right? This is all free resources that we want to provide you and give you the tools you need to be successful. So looking forward to Brian next week, JP and Derek. I mean, this is going to be a fun month to close. Dave, Rich, great to have you both here, and I will talk to you